What's up, everybody? How you doing? It's Dr. Brian. Welcome to the For Us Therapeutics Podcast with myself, Dr. Brian.
And Dr. Lakeith.
And before we get into this, we just ask that you like, comment, and subscribe and share with your friends, because what we're trying to do is we can't get everybody into the therapy office, so we're trying to give back some of the information that we do have to as many people as we can for free. So, going into this week's topic, we're going to talk about, I paused because it's not a topic that I try to avoid. It's just a topic that comes up so much, is that I find myself talking about it a lot because a lot of people need it. And I don't want people to think that that's all that we're about. However, though, because it comes up a lot, we're going to talk about relationships, specifically misconceptions in relationships. We're going to break down certain things about them. And interestingly, off camera, before we came in today, we were having a conversation about it. And one area I want to start with, and Keith, if you want to start with somewhere else, just let me know, is the topic we're going to start with is cheating, infidelity. You know, it's a very, very common thing. And it's a topic that comes up all the time. So, little brother, I want to start with you, if you don't mind.
Sure.
All right. In your experience, what leads, because there's a variety of things. You're never going to narrow it down to one thing. But from your experience of helping people and working with people, what is one of the things that will lead a partner to cheat on their significant other?
So, in my experience in doing couples therapy, usually we're talking about infidelity. Usually two. I would say the top two things that I see in couples therapy that leads to infidelity, believe it or not, number one, finances.
Okay.
But I also say finances feeds into number two, which is communication.
Okay.
As in, are we in a place where we can have these tough conversations around things that may be difficult for us? I mean that in an individual space, but also as a collective space, as a couple. And it's all of those things that aren't said that fill up our space, that just kind of haunts us like a ghost, or just makes us feel disconnected from the other person. And that's right around the time when we feel disconnected and we don't feel attached or secure with that person. We go and we seek attachment and security elsewhere. And sometimes that's with another partner.
What do you think keeps people from wanting to communicate and have those tough conversations?
Oh, that's a tough one, because that has so many answers. But to keep it simple, two things. One, I think sometimes it's people not being secure in their own voices.
Okay.
So sometimes it's things that go on with us that impact our relationship. As in, sometimes I may feel as though like, oh, they're not going to understand me, or they're not going to accept me, or they're not going to really hear what I'm saying, or they're going to just kind of be dismissive of it. And usually I tell couples, well, is there a history of that in your relationship? And if the answer is yes, then okay, then that is coming from a place of history, as in this does happen. But for the couples that come in and say like, well, no, they don't, they actually listen, that's usually when you kind of pinpoint, okay, there's something going on internally. There's some sort of insecurity that you may be having about voicing what it is that you want or what it is that you need, that unfortunately you're projecting that onto your partner, as in saying, but they're not going to listen to me. The evidence shows that they do listen to you when you open up. So having to kind of do some of that internal work. Secondly, it is also a case of, as I mentioned, if you have a history of a partner who can be dismissive, right? So if I'm constantly, not even constantly, just occasionally coming to you about concerns that I may have, rooted in our relationship or rooted just in some other things, and it's a shoulder shrug, or it's just indifference, or it's I don't have the time, or whatever it is that isn't leaning into your partner and really kind of affirming their feelings or affirming their experience and listening to what they have to say, it makes someone shut down. And it's like, well, I'm not going to open up and talk to you because what for? What do I get from it?
Okay. So shifting back to the first thing you said, finances. When you say finances, what about finances leads to infidelity?
Okay, so finances, as anyone knows, even on an individual level, finances are stressful. Getting it, keeping it, being able to pay for things, it's stressful. Compound that to when you are combining that with someone else. Because when we're talking about finances in a relationship, we're not just talking about how much money we make. We're not just talking about how much money we spend. We're also essentially talking about our lifestyle, right? So is our lifestyle aligned with each other to where as though our finances make sense? To where as though, like, if we're both extravagant, wonderful. We're both extravagant. We have that in common. We can build and probably hurt the credit in the process. We can build upon that. But if it's a situation where, okay, you're more extravagant and more luxurious, I'm more kind of, pull back, a little more conservative, that can be a conflict. As in, like, well, you never want to go out and have fun. You just want to be at home all the time and, just save the money. It's like, yeah, well, one of us has to, because you want to go out here and go to 4 or 5-star restaurants like every weekend, as if somehow or another we don't have other bills to pay. And that can create a chasm, because what we're essentially making commentary on is not just our spending practices. We're also having a conversation about the fact that we have this lifestyle that we maybe never even talked about prior to getting married or prior to living with each other. And now it's being brought before us because the fact that we have tied our money into each other, right? Towards when we were single and we just kind of spending money on dates and things like that, there's still that certain level of safety and detachment because, well, we're just dating. But now that we're married or we're cohabitating, it's the reality of, like, your lifestyle is impeding on my lifestyle to where so now I can't even say this is our lifestyle, and we don't talk about it. And then, of course, that leads to other issues, arguing, kind of sometimes shutting someone out and not talking to them, or sometimes maybe being overly aggressive in our language towards our partner, which, of course, again, it boils down to security. If I don't feel secure about how we're handling the situation of finances, then I'm going to go somewhere else where I can find that security and comfort.
So it sounds like communication is tied into the finance piece as well, because they're not talking about it.
Communication is very much tied into finance and having to have those tough, or as I like to say, courageous conversations. No avoiding them. If you try to avoid them, you're going to do more harm than good.
To piggyback off of your point, I agree with you as far as communication and finances. A lot of it, from my experience, has been communications. Like, for instance, there are 3 key complaints that I noticed that men who come to couples therapy have. They have an issue with, they feel as though that they're not respected by their partner, that their partner struggles with being held accountable, and they're not heard in their own relationship. Those are the 3 themes that I hear about from men in couples counseling: respect, accountability of their partner, and being heard. From women, who I hear in traditional heterosexual relationships and couples counseling, what I hear is they want consistency as far as you maintaining the same behaviors, as far as how you treated me before and how you treat me now. Granted, there's room to grow and change. Clarity, what are we doing, where we're going, how long we're going to be together. And consideration. Think of me when you're doing certain things when I'm not around, taking consideration my perspective of things. So on those 2 sides of the spectrums, I see those things when couples come together in relationships. And what leads them to, like you said, go and seek comfort elsewhere is that lack of communication. And communicating is always tricky, right? Because that is a big issue in couples counseling or in any relationship that you come across, right? There is something that keeps you from having certain conversations, or you're willing to engage in those conversations, but you don't know how to go about it. And I love this phrase, and it's do not underestimate the power of explaining yourself to your partner. Do not underestimate that potential, because one thing I find is, and I want to say it to the camera, don't let the victory of you being together for so long be the defeat that breaks you apart. And when I say that, what I'm saying is this: because you're assuming that your partner knows you and knows what you want, you don't clarify or ask, or you assume that you know your partner and you know what they want. You still don't clarify and ask. You just do. And the thing is, you aren't the same people that got together a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 7 years ago. You're constantly changing and evolving. And I do agree with you that communication is a big issue, because we're either not having a conversation or we're not expressing clearly what we want. And when I say that, I mean this. It boils down to a handful of things that you're trying to achieve when you're communicating, right? Are you looking to change the behavior of your partner? Are you looking to gain clarity about something that your partner did? Or are you looking to just exchange information? It's one of those three things that comes up when we're trying to communicate, right? But what we end up doing is, instead of just taking a moment to realize what we want, we criticize, blame, get passive aggressive and things like that. We don't communicate properly. We do a roundabout way of it. And next thing you know, we're arguing and exploding over each other, where if we knew exactly what we wanted and then communicated that, it'll be a lot better. Now, to the person that's not communicating, there's another layer to this. Do you feel your partner will receive what you're saying? That's something that you touched on earlier. So communication is not just the willingness to have the conversation. It's, do you feel like your partner will hear you? Because if you feel like you're not going to be heard, you'll shut down, like you said. You won't talk about anything. And now you're operating on your own script in a separate book in a different page.
Which is always interesting because you said something similar to what I like to tell clients, which is, okay, so your partner, they live in your heart, they don't live in your head. So you're going to have to let them know what's going on up there. And furthermore, the reason why you have to do that is because when we make assumptions without communicating them, we have to pause and ask ourselves, not even assumptions, when we have these requirements of our partner and we haven't communicated them to our partner, we have to pause and ask ourselves, so what are you holding them to? If I haven't told you what the need is, and if the need has changed, or what the desire is, or what the problem is, what are you really holding them to? Because the reality of the situation is you're holding them to an expectation that they don't know even exists, or maybe have switched up or changed, which is why I always say, like, you're going to have to talk about it. But my favorite line in that is like, well, we've been together for 10, 12, however long, many years. They should know. It's like,
can I pause you, Keith? It's one of those phrases. I hate this phrase. What's understood doesn't need to be said. That's the dumbest phrase. I can't stand that phrase. What?
Because it's in some sense
in street life.
Exactly.
Like if you in the hood, we in the street. What's understood doesn't need to be spoken. I got it. I'm not about to talk about the wrong things around unfamiliar people.
That part.
I'm not about to talk about the wrong things around people who don't need to know. What's understood doesn't need to be said. I got it. I know what certain gestures mean. I know what certain movements mean. We don't got to communicate that. You don't take that mindset to your relationship with your partner, though. But go ahead. I just want to get off my soapbox.
No, you're 100% correct. You can't. Because when we create these expectations, right, that we're not speaking upon, and we're not really letting our partner in, it's a situation where, like, actually, at that point, they're not hurting us. We're hurting ourselves.
Exactly.
We're hurting ourselves because it's a case of like, well, I needed this, I needed that, I needed this. It's like, okay, did you say that? No. And what did they do? They just went on doing what it is that they've always done. Okay, so who's hurt in this situation? Me. Well, why are you hurt? And then you got to really kind of go into that and really get them to understand that there's power in speaking to your partner. And then also, I will admit, I'm also one of those, well, all therapists are, but it's kind of like, I want to assess, like, okay, what is the barrier in communicating with your partner? Is it the partner themselves as far as like how they respond? Is it something internally to where as though you just have difficulty opening up and talking about it? Having to really kind of assess that, because sometimes it can be a combination of the two.
No, I agree with you, and you said it beautifully. Those silent evaluations against the rules that we have that we don't share with our partner. They frustrate us when they're not met, right? And that's the part that's really important, is communicating your expectations and your rules. Because me and you have talked about this before, that when you come into a relationship, you're literally bringing your past expectations and experiences with other people, and then your partner's bringing their past expectations and experience with other people, and their own rules about what it means to be in a relationship from their selves and in yours, and you're trying to overlap them. But instead, sometimes they start bumping heads. And in the example you gave where you said, well, I want them to do that. Well, did you share that with them? Well, no, I didn't. And yeah, ultimately, it's going to lead you to be frustrated, not your partner. And the thing is that then the next thing you're going to end up doing is you're going to probably get upset, get agitated, lash out, get passive aggressive. And instead of communicating, hey, why didn't you do this? Because 9 times out of 10, people don't understand that when you come together, you're formulating a new relationship.
Say that for the bloopers too.
You're forming. I got you good, man. Yeah. You're formulating a new relationship where you get to create new rules and new expectations, but it is those silent evaluations with your own personal rules that you didn't share with your partner. They will corrode a I want to make sure I use the right word because and when I'm doing couples therapy, so I look at a situation as two things. Either if you're in a bad relationship, it will corrode you, meaning from the inside out, it's the toxicity of things, or it will erode you, kind of like how when sand buffers up against a statue and all of a sudden the statue becomes smooth, like all those little fine lines that were there. If you sand a statue in a storm long enough, in a sandstorm, it'll smooth itself out. If your partner keeps doing certain behaviors, you'll become numb to them. That's what I call eroding you over time. But if you're dealing with internal things that you don't express to your partner, it will corrode you over time, making it toxic for yourself. So those silent evaluations are going to tend to make things toxic internally for you, where you're going to start to have resentment because it's like, why isn't my partner getting it? And it's because you just didn't communicate. So therefore, you're kind of operating on, from my perspective, what you're saying is like limited information. Like you're trying to attribute your partner's intentions to their actions, but you don't know exactly why they're doing what they're doing. So because of the narrative in your head, you're filling it with past negative experiences. But ultimately what I'm getting at is that because you're not fully aware of why your partner is doing certain things, you don't engage or talk to them. So you fill in the gap with what you think that they're doing. And unfortunately, as people, we tend to lean to the more negative side of things. And the problem with that is when you lean to the more negative side of things, you create an enemy out of your partner.
Yep.
Because even in the example you gave, they must be cheating. They must be entertaining somebody else. So then sometimes what do? You confront them or you retaliate. You go do the same thing. But I want to go back because we were talking about like certain things that lead to infidelity, right?
Yeah.
So communication tends to be an issue. And I agree with you because what you don't find at home, you will seek out in other areas, right? And I always tell people is that me and you had talked about it before we came on air is that all cheating is emotional, right? And when I say emotional, I don't mean like it's you're depressed or anxious or sad. I mean like actually you could be happy, right? Because what happens is you're cheating out of an urge or a desire. There's an image in your head of how things should be, right? So you want to make reality match that image. Oh, if my wife won't give me this, I'll go get it elsewhere. Or because my wife did this, I'll go get it elsewhere. Oh, he won't do this, so I'll go get it elsewhere. So therefore, you could actually be in a positive state, but it's just your habit, it's your norm. Yeah. Oh, well, my partner isn't willing to do this. This person is. I'll just do it and keep it moving. So my question to you, little brother, is this: is that when people are entering into that state of infidelity, and then they get caught. This is a question that gets asked a lot. Do you think that the person feels bad for cheating? Or what do you think they actually feel bad about?
Honestly, one, depends on the individual. Some people, it is a case of, no, I feel bad that I got caught. But of course, you don't want to say that because nobody wants to be looked at as like that guy or that girl. So it gets masked as in like, I'm sorry that I cheated and I hurt you. Then you got some people where it's really that, as in like, I'm sorry that I really did hurt you. I don't know what I was thinking. And then you got some people, it's a combination of the two. Because honestly, I think in my personal opinion, honestly, I think it's a combination of the two for the majority of people. Yes, I'm very much sorry that I hurt you because now I'm seeing the effects of that and what that's doing to you and what that's doing to us. But also in a very human space, it's also a case of, yeah, I'm embarrassed I got caught. And I feel really embarrassed that I got caught doing something that I know I wasn't supposed to do. And now I have to deal with the reality that you and whoever else finds out about this situation is going to look at me differently.
Fair enough. I don't got no issue with what you said. I agree with that 100%. Sometimes it's I feel bad that I hurt you. Sometimes it's I feel bad that I hurt you and you found out. Sometimes I feel bad about doing the actual act. So then when it comes to communication, right, how do you think people, or what advice would you give to people who struggle with communication? So I guarantee you, me and you got either, I think we're going to have different answers, Along the same line. So go ahead. What is your answer?
Well, for one, okay, of course, bias and also probably a plug, therapy.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think that even before, well, you could do couples therapy, but I think that even before you do couples therapy, I think individual therapy to kind of talk about that because I'd imagine for some people, it's a case of if you're not speaking up here, you're probably not speaking up in other spaces.
Problem.
Now, that's not true for everybody. There's some people where it's kind of like they may be very bold and very open and very communicative in other areas of their life. But when it comes to a romantic relationship, not so much. But either reason, it's still a good place to come to therapy to kind of talk about that. Like, well, what is holding you back from that? What's preventing that? Also, I am not a big fan of people being in other people's relationships, i.e., family and friends.
Mm-hmm.
That no. They're not in love with your partner. You are. But I also do believe that having a village of accountability helps, as in those
I
one
like
or
that.
two friends. And I mean, when I say this, you know who they are, and if you're not able to identify them, that means you might want to look at your friend circle and kind of reassess who's around, like have them around. Those one or two friends where you know if this was to come up in front of them, their only interest is in your well-being and your character and knowing what you stand for and kind of having those conversations with you like, well, what does this mean? Why did this happen? And really kind of listening to you to provide support, not try to add flames to the fire, not try to add fuel to the fire as far as like, oh man, look, whatever, it is what it is, just go do you. Or like, oh well, he did that, you should just leave him. No, more so kind of invested in your relationship in the sense of, well, do you guys want to work this out? Are you guys willing to work this out? And because also those particular friends are also the first ones to tell you, again, all roads lead back to therapy, right? You guys should probably go to a couples therapist and kind of like figure out if this is something that can be worked on. And I always tell people, you know, people are rooted in the best interest of your relationship, of their support system, if they do their best to maintain a neutral stance. Okay. If you have a friend that's too much for you, then it's biased, clearly. Right? And if you have a friend that's so much for your partner, it's also still biased. But if you have a friend that's more so kind of rooted in like, well, what do you guys want to do? And I know this is really difficult. How can I support you or how can I support y'all? That can actually that could also actually be very beneficial. But again, that is a very special type of friend or friends that would support you in that capacity.
No, those are good answers. I knew we was going to have different answers. There's nothing wrong with it. I like your advice as far as the having a village of accountability thing. And coming to therapy, yes, definitely. Couples counseling is very, 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 very beneficial to relationships. So my advice would be communicating the image that you have in your head of what you want versus what you're getting out of reality. So what I mean is this, by that is, get as specific with what you're looking to get out of your partner or a situation with your partner, down to as much detail as you possibly can. Going back to what I said, don't underestimate the power of explaining yourself because you don't want victory to keep defeating you in your relationship. So communicate the image of what you wanted from this situation with your partner and then talk about what you got. That way, you know exactly what you're dealing with and they know what you're dealing with. So literally, like, hey, when we went out, and I'm gonna pick something arbitrary.
Yeah.
When we went out to dinner, I was expecting you to cover the whole bill. I wasn't expecting us to go 50-50. What you wanted, the whole bill. What happened was 50-50. And then you share, like what emotion did that make you feel? Because emotions tend to be one word. I always tell people that. If you find yourself stringing together a bunch of words together, you're creating a sentence. That's a thought. But you can have more than one emotion. I felt disappointed and I felt upset. Okay. Yeah. I felt disappointed and I felt upset because I was expecting for you to cover 100% of the bill. But instead, we ended up going 50-50. What was the breakdown? Now that you shared what you wanted as your mental picture versus what reality gave you, your partner gets to see your perspective. Oh, okay, I get what you mean. My bad, sweetie. Because the night before, we were talking about the concept of going Dutch. And I thought that you were cool with that. Moving forward, I won't do that no more. I'll just cover the whole bill. I picked a random arbitrary conversation like that because it's even as simple in those categories, right? Because you two were operating in that scenario off of two different expectations. You were expecting him mentally in your head to cover the whole bill. Whereas he's operating under the conversation we had last night. I thought that going Dutch moving forward would be cool. My bad. I will reassess and readjust. But let's say that you didn't communicate it that way. You're going to build some type, you're going to feel sad and upset, and that could turn into anger. Because now you're going to be on alert next time if y'all go out is he going to do what he did before? Is he going to do what I expected him to do? But if you don't share it with him, he's going to default because he's on a different page. So I say that to say yes. Sharing what you wanted in your head versus what reality gave you. That's the first thing that I would recommend. The other thing I would recommend is just implementing new behaviors to bring yourself closer, right? So me personally, if y'all didn't know, I'm very big into spirituality, especially Christian spirituality, because it's the foundation in which I live my life certain times, right? So one of the benefits I always give church and faith is that it kind of lays out the rules for you of what you should and shouldn't be doing. Now, whether you want to live exactly to those rules, that's up to you. I'm not here to pass judgment, nor am I here to condemn anybody. It's up to you because I don't live perfectly according to every rule laid out in the Bible, right? But what it is this. The reason why I say that you can implement new behaviors as far as using your faith is if it lays it out for you, that means Scripture lays out the picture of what you should be doing. So you both can literally look at that picture and go, where are we meeting it? Where are we falling short? How close can we get to it? That's the reason why I use that one, because it's one of those things where if you two are of the same faith and there's a rule book on what you should be doing, you might not be able to match the entirety of the rule book, but that's okay. But if y'all have that foundational image of what you should be doing, that generates a conversation of, okay, this is what we should be doing. This is where I can meet you at. This is where you can meet me at. All right, this is as close as we can get. Then we can come back and reassess. I think that I don't want to say over communicating because there are points where you can over communicate yourself, and I don't want nobody to make that a habit. But don't underestimate explaining your perspective with your partner. Now, here's the next part of it. When your partner's communicating to you, you have to be in a space to receive it and create an environment where they feel comfortable talking to you. Do you want to touch on that, Dr. Key?
Well, yeah. I mean, put it this way. If ever you're going to be able to open up to your partner, or for anyone for that matter, but we'll focus on partner in this context, it has to be a secure place, right? So, and number one, I always like to tell couples, if no other relationship is a secure space in your life, your romantic relationship should be.
Right.
Because this is the one where it's the most powerful. And by that, what I mean is this. What makes love so powerful is the thing that also makes it very scary. As in, every single day, we choose each other. We're not tied into each other by way of blood relations or anything of that nature. This is a conscious decision that, okay, every day we want to be with each other. Now, of course, you could throw in marriage. There's legalities to that. But even still, it's a case of you could choose not to be with that person and get a divorce. And I understand that's a process, but you can still choose not to. So for the fact that every day we choose each other, it's a very powerful thing. And it makes us feel like, wow, you really do love me. But also conversely, it can also be very scary because that means at any given point or any given time, we could choose not to be with each other, right? We could choose to just walk away and, let that be that. So I always kind of acknowledge that, and I always encourage couples to acknowledge that because it's a reality. And if it's a situation where we're choosing each other every day, and it's a reality of also like we've been together more often than not, then this is the case we have to realize that we want to be here and the other person wants to be here. Right. So if that's the case, then neither one of us is running. Then the next thing becomes a case of, okay, so what does it mean to create a secure space? And that could be one, as we mentioned, and you hear it a lot in all couples therapy, it's going to be the communication piece. But then also it's kind of figure out, well, what does a secure space look like for us in a unique manner, right? So security looks different for each couple. I mean, there's some universal tenets to it, as in like open communication, unwavering support, unconditional love. That's definitely a part of it. But security also looks unique for some couples, as in like I have some couples where it's like they do weekly check-ins, as in every week, Thursday at 8 p.m., we sit down and we talk about what's going on with us. Other couples, it's not that frequent. It's a case of just kind of like we talk when things are an issue. We talk on the fly. Some couples, it's a case of, well, we're just very intentional about spending quality time with each other. So as a partner, as members in the relationship, I should say, it really is trying to figure out what does security look like. Hence, and I know we're probably one of us is gonna talk about it, so I'll just go ahead. Like love languages, right?
Mm-hmm.
Granted, I'm pretty sure everyone now knows love languages because it's entered into the pop psychology lexicon. It's not a bad thing, but that's also a great tool too to kind of figure out what does it mean to create a secure space for us based off of what your needs are, and particularly what your main needs are. Is it physical touch? Is it affirmation? Is it a quality time? Is it gifts? And if we identify that with each other, we agree that those things are things that we can do, then we do those to create a safe space to really kind of have these tough conversations. But then that goes to the last part, which is, I mean, personally, I don't feel as though you can have a safe space or secure space if you're not having tough conversations. That's usually how you know it's not secure. So I say that you have to look at it as those tough conversations, not as things of derision or division, but an opportunity to actually be able to make our connection go deeper. So another part of that is perspective, right? As you said earlier, but not necessarily using the term perspective, is how do we reshape how we view some of these challenges in our relationship? Are we viewing them as things as in like, we're never going to be able to overcome this? Or this is going to be like hell and high water to overcome this? Are we looking at it as like, yeah, this is going to be tough, but I have faith that we could do it. And at the end, it's actually going to bring us closer together.
I would also recommend that when your partner is sharing that perspective with you and they're sharing what they want to communicate with you, you as the listener, you need to be willing to receive it non-judgmentally, right? And that's easier said than done.
Facts.
Because what you're about to do is you're going to listen to them explain to you what they expected, and you're going to judge it against your own value system. And that part can be tricky, right? Because to you, your values are right. They're absolute. So they're going to look at life differently than you do. So the moment that they say something that goes against your values, you're going to shut down or get ready to attack and defend yourself. I always tell people this. You got to recognize that when your partner comes to you to share something with you like that, that's their reality. That's the way they think. It doesn't mean that it's the reality or that it's even rooted in truth. But you got to be willing to receive their reality and know that that's how they look at life. I always tell people this. You got to look at it as when you're driving in a car, right? Your perspective of me driving, like if I'm the driver and you're the passenger, your perspective of my driving is different than mine. Like, for instance, if you look out of the passenger window, you're going to have a different image than if I turn my head and look out of the passenger window looking past your head, right? Yep. You have a clearer picture of what's outside of your passenger window than I do, because I only see part of your picture with your head in the way. That's just how it is. And it's the same thing if I turn to the driver's side. I have a full image of everything on my driver's side window. You have a partial image with my head in the way. And even if we look out of the actual front window, when I look, I'm looking at everything from the perspective and the mindset of me operating the vehicle. I don't want it to crash. I'm aware of all the cars around me. I'm preparing to merge lanes. I know the speed limit I'm going. You're looking out of your side of the front window from the passenger side. You don't know how fast I'm going. You have an idea about how the car's traveling. You don't know when I'm ready to merge lanes or jump into the next lane or not. You don't even know how close the car is behind us because you don't have the rear view mirror. So I always use that analogy to say, when your partner shares their perspective with you, recognize it's their reality. It's not your reality just yet. They're inviting you in. They're basically leaning the chair back a little bit so you can see what they're seeing. So I think that part is important, because when you find yourself in a place of you're judging your partner or you're not hearing your partner, it's because you're taking your values and throwing an appraisal on what they share with you. It's not going to help. That's not going to create a atmosphere of them being comfortable talking to you. So what you need to do is receive them. And then what I would recommend is repeat back what they said to you in your own words, from your perspective, just like we do in therapy. Like literally say, all right, sweetie, I heard what you're saying. If I understood you correctly, you were upset that we went 50-50 on this date and you were expecting me to pay for it. And that made you upset, right? Like, yeah, how come it made, then you got to get curious with one another at that point. How come that made you upset? Well, because, you normally pay for everything. And what happened this time? Like, you normally pay for everything, and today you just switched up out of nowhere. Oh, you thought I switched up out of nowhere. Yeah, like, why did you switch up out of nowhere? I didn't switch up out of nowhere. I was operating from the conversation we had last night. Oh, you thought because we had the conversation about going Dutch last night and I was cool with it, that I wanted to start that today. Nah, I didn't want to start that today. We started that with other people's relationship. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Where when you recognize that that's their reality, not your reality, and you both get curious about each other's reality, then I think you're in a space where you feel comfortable to communicate. Because if they can't communicate with you, they're going to communicate with somebody else.
Well,
because the streets is full of people to communicate with.
This is true. But that leads me to, and I'll pose this, compatibility.
Mm-hmm.
As in, do you feel as though, from your experience working with couples, that people even really realize whether they're actually compatible with their partner or not? Now, granted, I know as clinicians, we can't necessarily make that call. Mm-hmm. That's something that they have to determine for themselves. But I will also acknowledge the fact that as a clinician working with some couples, it's a case of this isn't a communication issue anymore. It probably wasn't to begin with. This is a compatibility issue, as in we view life completely different, right. And we have different values and we have different practices that somehow or another we have not fully reconciled, or we're not trying to compromise on them.
I'm actually glad you gave that definition, because I was going to say, it depends on what you mean by compatibility, right? Yeah. Like when you said we look at life in two different ways, do I think that couples recognize that? Yes. Do I think that they try to fight through it? Yes. Or do I think they ignore it? Yes. Or do I think they get numb to it? Yes. But do I think that couples can become compatible with two different outlooks on life? Yes, if they want to. If they have an open mind, everything, in my opinion, can be correction. Most things can be fixed with a healthy conversation. I'm not gonna look. I'm a black African American male in America. I am not gonna look at life the same way that a white woman from London is gonna look at life. We are just not. But we can come on to the same page and have an understanding that that's how you look at life. This is how I look at life. Okay, moving forward, this is how we gonna look at life. Because everybody has that relationship with, there's that one partner that's overly aggressive, the other partner that's real cool and easy to go with, but y'all don't play about each other. So that one partner knows, my boyfriend is really, really volatile. Yeah. So, okay, you know that. So then the other person goes, so my boyfriend keeps me in check from being volatile, right? Yeah. You both look at one situation differently, but you both know how the other person will respond. Mm-hmm. That's what I mean by, can you become compatible? Absolutely. Because you might look at somebody cutting you off as something slight, something minor. Mm-hmm. Your partner might look at somebody cutting you off like, this motherfucker over here, where he learned to drive at. So therefore, when that situation happens, as y'all become more compatible with each other, you now know how you gonna respond to disrespect.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I do agree with that. I do believe that if two people...
And you can say this in closing, because
I'm sorry. I do believe that if two people want to be compatible, they can't be, even if there are differences. It's just a case of having to, one, recognize those differences and really kind of ask yourself, is this a situation where, like, I'm willing to work through this and kind of, whatever the differences are, embrace them or accept them? Mm-hmm. And going back to the main topic as far as like infidelity, I think that oftentimes by the time couples make their way here, it's a situation where one of two things have happened. One, they don't know how to be compatible with their partner, so they're struggling and they feel disconnected and they're seeking comfort. Or two, and this is always the hard part, they come to therapy knowing that, but for some reason they want to work with you to give it that good old-fashioned try, as they should, to see if there's a possibility. But then at some point they realize, whether it's both sides or one side, as in, I don't think I really want to try to be compatible with you.
The easy exit.
Yeah, I don't think I really want to be compatible with you. And as a therapist, I would say, and we'll say that for another podcast, that's always the difficult one part, because then it becomes a case of, so when one or both sides recognizes it, it's a case of, so now is this a couples therapy of us trying to figure out how you guys are going to consciously depart ways amicably, or is this a couples therapy where like now we've come to this conclusion and now we really are going to focus on like, okay, you're going to really try to be compatible? And usually, unfortunately, it's usually the prior versus the latter, as in like, nah, I think that this is, we have to go our separate ways.
Nah, I was going to say that. I'll say that. I know I said you can say it in closing. You touched on a good point. Usually, when they get to that point in couples therapy, where one partner gets an awareness about, I don't want to do this no more, ain't no coming back to therapy. I get an email. They'd be like, "Hey, Dr. B, we decided that this just ain't gonna work. I appreciate all your help. You did a great job. I appreciate you getting me to this point. But yeah, we won't. We're gonna call it quits." I've had that happen before. I'm like, "Oh, all right," and then someone stays on to do individual therapy moving forward to go through that process of what does life look like on the other side of not being with this person anymore.